Hi everyone, welcome to Lecture 1, Part 2 of State and Local Public Finance. And for this part of the lecture, I wanted to go through some of the background structures of what the state and local government looks like, and thus that motivates what are the different various parts that we're going to actually study. All right, so what is the state and local government? This is something that you guys are already probably pretty familiar with. So the state and local system are basically all of these units that are defined by the U.S. Constitution. So the big umbrella federal government, and then comes down to the state government. And then the state government, for example, the state of Oregon, then has units that are defined by the state constitution. So starting from the state government down, these are all of our regional and local government structures. And usually from the state down, you usually have your counties, and then in certain states we have townships, and then we also have municipalities, which includes cities, towns, and villages. And then school districts are another large type of unit that is defined by state constitution. And then we have a lot of other special districts that are districts that perform specific functions within your local or state governments. And we'll take a look at what those are in just a second. So, if you wanted to take a look at what various different states kind of define in terms of the structure, here's kind of a sample of several different states to give you a better idea. So different states have different sizes of counties or municipalities. So for example, here in Oregon, we have approximately 1,500 state and local government entities. So these include anywhere from the state, county, municipalities, down to all of your special and school districts. So we have 36 counties here in Oregon. We have 230 school districts. So these are your Portland Public School, Beaverton Public School District, Hillsborough Public School District. We have school districts all around the state. And then we have our special districts. So think back in your head, what are special districts? So, so special districts are really very specific functional districts that do certain things. So, for example, we have Monoma County has a drainage district, for example. So this is a district that governs all of where the drainage water goes, and also governs the levee system that protects Portland from flooding from the Columbia River. And all of the funding and expenditures, the maintenance, the certifications that go along with that are part of this drainage district, which is a special district. We also have a Monoma County Library District that was just formally formed a couple of years ago by a ballot vote. So that's a special district with specific sources coming in terms of revenue for that particular district, and then expenditures going out specifically for the library district. You also have water districts, you have fire districts. So a lot of things that are very specific and essential to the functioning of a local government are part of special districts. But you can also see on here that different states use special districts to a very different extent. So Alaska, obviously, on here, it's a relatively low population state, so it has fewer state and local government entities, but it only has 15 special districts and has no specific school districts, which can mean that school districts, or the function of schools and K through 12 education, is provided by a different branch of the government. Whereas on the other end of the spectrum here, you can see California and Illinois, which have 2,000-3,000 special districts that function in very specific ways. So so there is a lot of variability amongst different states in terms of how they structure their governments. That's governed by their specific state constitution. And you will also, or have already read about this in Chapter 1 of the State and Local Public Finance textbook. One thing that is slightly interesting is that special districts have become kind of a more and more increasing type of local government structure over past years. So here's a graph that shows you the number of special districts in 1952. So if you can read the text on here, you can see that things like fire districts, water districts, housing and community development, drainage districts, flood control, soil conservation, air quality authorities, ports, hospitals, mass transit, utilities, geothermal heating, weed control, all of these can be special districts. And on this map that you see on here, the darker areas represent the counties that have more special districts than others. There's some variability because the more eastern center and eastern states have relatively smaller counties than the western side of the U.S., more or less due to historic and population reasons. And that attributes somewhat to where there are more special districts than others. But this spread is quite interesting. Even amongst the states that have similarly sized counties, the number of special districts is quite different. But note that this is 1952. And let's advance to 2012, which is the last time this graph was updated. You can see that the number of special districts has really increased in very staggering amounts. So let me do that again. So going back to 1952 all the way to 2012. So increasingly local governments are making use of these very specialized districts to manage the specific functions and also the revenue and expenditure streams in a very specific way. And this is a very particular topic that a lot of people have some concerns about whether this is the correct way to go about performing specific functions. And there are a lot of really interesting types of special districts that you might find, and we'll take a look at a video of that in just a second. But let me bring you back to Portland Metro. So this is a map that you guys have seen probably many, many times of the Portland Metro boundaries. And here in Portland, we have this very specialized kind of metro government that spans more than one county and more than one particular city. What this means is that even within the boundaries of Portland Metro, which we consider to be a relatively integrated area, we have a lot of diversity in terms of jurisdictional structures and also different policies. And that diversity is really interesting in the state and local public finance context. So that diversity in terms of taxation, in terms of land use rules, in terms of zoning, all of that diversity is really interesting because there is also mobility. So this is the point where I want to bring up that relationship between diversity and mobility in this particular context, is that diversity, having these different jurisdictions and the different special districts or municipalities that you are part of, becomes uninteresting if there is no such thing as mobility. And the fact that people, citizens, are free to move about and decide where they want to live, where they want to work, where they want to consume, makes things very interesting, because now people can actually vote with their feet and vote with their dollars. And on the flip side, all of this mobility, your physical mobility or your economic mobility, are also unimportant if there is no such diversity that we're talking about. if, for example, moving from the Multnomah County part of Portland Metro to the Washington County part of Portland Metro means that there is just exactly the same landscape, the exact same landscape in terms of economics, in terms of political structures, in terms of district structures and everything. If there's no diversity, then that mobility really doesn't give you anything interesting. Thus, diversity is uninteresting without mobility, and physical and economic mobility are unimportant without diversity. And that's what makes all of this so interesting, is that there is so much diversity and mobility at the same time. So next I wanted you guys to take a look at this 15-minute video by John Oliver talking about special districts, and you'll find out what normal people in the world think about special districts, and also find out about some examples of very interesting special districts that are out there that do perform their specific functions, but because there's so many special districts, the people that you need to kind of run a special district really varies, and the people who are willing to participate also vary. So I encourage you to take a look at this very interesting video, and I will also post the link in D2L in case you're unable to access it here. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about state and local revenues in Oregon. So you might imagine that the largest source of state and local revenues come from taxes. Taxation is a huge part of state and local public finance, and that's why we'll be spending quite a good amount of time on talking about taxes, how they work, and how the fact that they work differently actually does affect and impact how policies might be structured and how you might be able to expect the revenues that you need to perform certain types of policy goals. So the general kinds of taxes that you'll see are your personal income taxes, corporate income taxes, property taxes, selective sales tax. So these are the general larger kinds of taxes, and here in Oregon, we don't really have sales tax, but we do have certain types of selective sales tax, which include things like gas tax. So selective sales tax refer to sales tax that are applied specifically to selected kinds of goods. So we have gas tax, we have other things like cigarette tobacco tax, we also have alcohol taxes, and in certain jurisdictions we also have some real estate transfer taxes. So there's a lot of excise taxes on selective things. We also have the cannabis tax here in Oregon after the legalization of recreational marijuana, for example. So there is also another very large source of revenue that you'll see, especially when you take a look at specifically the spreadsheets that detail the revenues and expenditures of Oregon and other states in your problem set. You'll find that there is such a thing called intergovernmental revenue. And that intergovernmental revenue comes from, generally, the largest source of it comes from the federal government, especially at the state level. So most governments get a good chunk of that money because people that reside in all of these states pay a good chunk of personal income taxes at the federal level to the federal government, and then the federal government then takes that revenue and revenue from other sources and then distributes that again to the states for various reasons and purposes. All right, so we will pick up on what are charges in the next segment of this lecture.